this episode of the G4 Sumobot series, we're going to add some branding to our Sumobot. We'll add some badges on the left and right hand side, and we'll add our name on the back. Blender has the ability to import SVG files, or scalable vector graphics files, into a scene as a curved object, and then Blender allows you to convert that into a mesh. It's as simple as going up to File in the menu, going to Import, clicking on Scalable Vector Graphics, and selecting the SVG file that you would like to turn into a mesh. We're going to do all of our work in Inkscape, which is a scalable vector graphics program. Inkscape is free, just like Blender. If you're comfortable with creating your own art, you can just begin with that in Inkscape, or if you prefer, you can look around on the web for existing SVG files and build on them in Inkscape. I found an SVG file of a maple leaf that I'd like to use on Wikimedia. It's the one here called Maple Leaf from Roundel. You can use any SVG file. You need to make sure, though, that it is a file that ends in .svg. I'm going to download that to my computer, and now I'm ready to import it to Inkscape and to begin tinkering with it. Open an SVG file by going up to File and choosing either Open or Import to bring an SVG file into an existing document. And here is the maple leaf that I downloaded earlier. I'm going to start by darkening up the maple leaf. And now if I want to, I can come in with the node tool and I can modify how the SVG looks. But I'm going to bring in a second SVG. So again, I'm going to come up here to Import, and I'm going to grab the Skills Canada logo. I'm going to accept the defaults. Now I have a second logo here. I'm going to start by shrinking down this logo. I'm going to drag it into the center. I'm going to rotate it slightly. And now I'm going to modify these bottom tails here a little bit. This Skills Canada logo is a group of multiple objects, so I'm going to ungroup it. And now I'm going to use the node tool, and I'm going to modify where these logos end. I'm going to add a couple of vertices here to keep the basic shape intact. And I'm happy with that. I'm going to regroup it. There's the logo. And now we're going to go File. And we're going to save this as a badge. And now we'll import this into Blender and we'll turn it into a mesh. When we import an SVG file into Blender, it will show up where our 3D cursor's at. My 3D cursor's at the origin, and so the SVG file is going to get imported underneath the Sumobot. I'm going to hide the Sumobot so that I can see the origin. And now I'm going to go File, Import, Scalable Vector Graphics. I'm going to select the location of my badge that I created, and I'm going to import it. Now, it looks like nothing imported in, but you can see here that the badge and all the paths that are part of the SVG were imported in. If we zoom in really far, we'll see that our SVG has imported at a really small scale. And we're going to increase the size of it by 1000%. So I'm going to come into scale here, and I'm going to quickly set all of these paths to 1000 on the X and Y. Next, we're going to reset the mover gizmo to the center of each one of these objects. I'm going to select them all in the scene outliner, and then up to Object, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry. Now each one of these will have the mover gizmo placed right in the center so that they're easy to move, and I'm going to move the leaf underneath so that we can see the other parts of the badge. I'm going to rename the path for the leaf, call it leaf, and the next thing that I want to do is I want to convert all of these paths into meshes. So again, I'm going to select them all, go to Object, go to Convert, and choose Mesh. Before we can use these meshes, we need to do a little cleanup on them. I'm going to start by selecting the leaf, tabbing into Edit Mode, And I'm going to select all the faces. Up to mesh, I'm going to go to cleanup and I'm going to choose merge by distance. So we had 339 vertices that we moved, but this geometry is more complicated than we want it to be. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to mesh, and under cleanup again, I'm going to choose decimate geometry. Here under the ratio, I'm going to choose a ratio of 0.6. I've just experimented with this and this seems to work pretty well, but you can experiment yourself just by clicking and dragging in. And in fact, I think for this, let's go with 0.06. So that retains most of the basic shape. We go back to the original, we're not losing a whole ton by going with 0.06. So I'm happy with that. And now I'm going to extrude this mesh. I'm going to press E on the keyboard, and I'm going to extrude downwards. So now I have a extruded mesh of the leaf, and now it's time to add the secondary logo on top of it. Press Tab to get back into object mode. And now we're going to select these light red portions of the logo. I'm actually going to group them, so Control J. And I'm going to give them a name over here. I'm going to call them Logo 1. And I'm going to call this other part of the logo, I'm going to call this Logo 2. I have a reason for this. We're going to start with the Logo 1 portion. And just like we did a moment ago, we're going to go into edit mode. And I'm going to clean up any extra vertices that are there. And I will also decimate this geometry. Maybe not as much as we did with the leaf. That is too much, of course. So I'm going to come into here and I want to decimate it enough, but retain most of the basic shape. And that seems to do the job. So I'm going to leave it there. Like last time, I am going to extrude the this part of the logo down. So I'm going to press E. And I'm going to extrude it downwards into the leaf. To see how far I've gone, I can hit Control or Shift Z on the keyboard. I can see that I've gone a little bit too far down, but this is adequate. Shift Z to get back into regular view mode. And I'm going to tab to go into object mode. Now I'm going to use a Boolean operation, and I'm going to add this part of the logo as relief on top of the leaf. So select the leaf, go to the objects modifier panel and grab Boolean. This time I'm going to be doing a union, and we may end up running into problems with this. We're using the exact option on the solver, and this sometimes causes problems for complex unions. So I'm going to find logo 1, and we've run into exactly the problem that I thought we would. So let's click fast on the solver, and that makes it so that we don't end up with this problem with the Boolean union operation. I'm going to apply the union, and I'm going to hide the first part of the logo. Now I'm going to inset logo number 2. So right click on it, and I'm going to go into the mesh, and I'll just make sure there are no extra vertices there. I'm happy with the way that one looks, so I'm not going to decimate this one. And now I'm going to extrude it. So E to extrude down. Just check where it ended up, which is too far down. Out there looks good, and I'm happy with that. So back into object mode. Now I'm going to have a small problem with this one. This one is going to cause conflicts because when I try to do a Boolean difference, it's going to cause problems with the solver. I have too many shared vertices between the first part of the logo 1 and the vertices for logo 2, so I have too many shared edges. So the easiest way to solve that is to increase the size of logo 2. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to set it to 1030 and oh, too much. 1030 and 30. That will put it in a different position than the logo 1 pieces. And so now I'm going to grab it, grab the leaf, Boolean, and we're staying with difference. So I'm going to find logo 2, use the fast solver, and apply it. So when I hide logo 2 and I go in and look at it, I now have a depression for the logo 2 component. And this is going to allow us to create a really interesting badge effect on the side of the Sumobot. To apply the badge, we now need to scale and rotate our leaf. So we're going to bring back our Sumobot, and we can see that the leaf is much larger than the spot where we're going to put this badge. So we're going to scale the badge first. Now, currently my scale is still sitting at 1,000 times. I'm going to actually apply my current scale. So Control A will allow me to apply the scale and set it back down to 1 for X, Y, and Z. And now I need to shrink down the size. I'm going to shrink the badge in the X and Y directions only. I'll start with 0.5 and I'm going to rotate it. And I'm going to rotate this -90 on Z. And I'm going to rotate it 90 on X. And now I'm going to see whether I have sufficiently scaled my leaf. And it looks like my leaf is still just too big. So let's scale it by 0.4. That looks right. Let's center it, and I think it'd be interesting if I rotated the leaf a little bit. So let's rotate it 15 degrees on Y. And now let's make sure that the badge is close enough to the side of the Sumobot. So I'm going to go into wireframe mode, and I've got 2 parts of the badge now. Or 3 parts. I've got the leaf, I've got the inset, and I've got the outset parts. So I need to make sure that this inset part goes in at least past where the edge of the Sumobot is. So I'm going to try that, and I'm happy with the way that looks. So now I'm going to click on the Sumobot body, and I'm going to add a Boolean difference for my leaf. And I'll use the fast solver and apply it. I'm going to hide the leaf and look at it. The easiest way to see the shapes that we've put into the side here is go into edit mode, and there we go. Now, I've created a small issue here. The logo is actually the mirror of what it was supposed to be. But that's actually really easy to solve. Blender includes a mirror modifier, and so we're going to use that. So I'm going to Control Z and remove that Boolean difference. And I'm going to move my leaf out so that I can look at it. And I'm going to apply a mirror operator to it. Now, the mirror operator is going to create a mirror image around a particular point. I'm going to use the origin here, the 3D cursor sitting at the origin, and I'm going to reset the origin of the geometry to the location of the 3D cursor. So to do that, I'm going to come here, set origin, and I'm going to say set origin to 3D cursor. Now I'm going to grab the mirror modifier, and this allows us to choose which axis we're going to use. I'm going to mirror around the Z-axis, and that's going to give me the mirror image of my logo, and when I apply the Boolean difference operation, the logo is actually going to be pointed in the right direction. Now, right now, this is a single object, so I'm going to apply this, but now I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to select all the parts, but I'm going to break the object up into its loose parts. So I'm going to press P on the keyboard. And I'm going to choose by loose parts. And now I am going to go back into object mode, and I'm going to return the origin to the center of the geometry. So I need to do that for both leaves. I'm going to select the leaf on the left, object, set origin, origin to geometry, and I'm going to do the same thing for the other leaf. I'm actually going to rename the original leaf now. I'm going to call this leaf mirror. And I'm just going to call the leaf I want to use leaf. And I'm going to hide the leaf mirror for right now. Now it's time to try the Boolean operation again. I'm going to bring it in nice and close and make sure that the inset part is pulled past the edge of the Sumobot. Click on the Sumobot body and add the Boolean modifier for the leaf using the fast solver, and let's have a look at this. And again, I'm going to go into edit mode, and there we are. So now I have the leaf badge on the side of my Sumobot. The logo is oriented in the right direction, so I'm happy with this badge. Now I'm going to apply the badge to the other side of the Sumobot. Now I don't want to use the mirror image of it. I'm going to simply rotate this this badge onto the other side. So select it and move it, and I'm going to rotate it around Z. So let's call this let's rotate that to 90. And I'm also going to rotate it around the x-axis again so that I can get the tilt of the leaf pointed to the right. Oop. Let's square that up at 90. Guess it's the y-axis. All right. So there we are. So that gives me sort of a parallel position for my badge. And now it's time to create the inset or the recess for the badge, and that's approximately like the other side. And so now I'm going to perform another Boolean difference operation. Using the fast solver, and let's have a look. So there we are. So the logo again is pointed in the right direction. The leaf is rotated sideways. They're slightly different, but that makes it interesting. And so now we've applied badges to both sides of the Sumobot. The last thing that we're going to do is we're going to add our name onto the back. To create text in Blender, we can use the built-in text tool. We add it the same way we would a mesh, Shift A, and we can add text. It's currently created at the origin, so we'll bring it out and we'll zoom in. You can see that it's a very small piece of text. We've got two ways of making it bigger. We can convert this into a mesh, extrude it and scale it, or we can use the text modifier tools down here. And here under the font, we can increase the size of the text this way. So click on it and call it 30. And that'll give us a bigger piece of text. To modify what it says, tab into edit mode, delete it. There we are. And you can see that this is too big, so scale it down. And now we need to rotate this. We're going to rotate it on X. So we'll rotate it 90 degrees, and it's backwards here. So let's rotate it on Z. Let's give it -180. And let's move it back behind our Sumobot. Now that we have it here, though, this is still just a curve. We need to convert this into a mesh. So go up to Object, Convert to Mesh. When we tab into Edit Mode and look at it, we want to make sure we don't have any extra vertices. Select them under Mesh, go to Cleanup, and make sure that we don't have any extra vertices. We don't. Now we can extrude this. So let's press E and extrude it out, and let's bring it close to our Sumobot body and inset it just a little bit like this. Let's make sure that it's centered. And that looks pretty good like this. And now we can do a Boolean difference. And this one's going to be called text. So go down, find it, and apply. And when we do that, we now have text into the back of our Sumobot. So our branding on this is complete, but perhaps you would like to use a more interesting font than this. So we can use a more interesting font in Blender, but Blender has trouble with TrueType fonts and sometimes mangles the fonts. So if you wanted to try out Blender's tool for that, we just need to revert until our text is back into its basic form here. Let's go back into here, and under font you can choose a font that you'd like to use. So I'm going to jump to my fonts folder, and my fonts folder is hidden, so I need to make sure I show all my files. And let's make sure I'm looking in the right spot. All right, so here's my collection of TrueType fonts. And so I'll look for something like, and if you have a font that you want to look, you can use your system font manager to find the name of it. I don't know. I'm just gonna grab this. So there we are. I guess that's kind of interesting. So there is Blender using a different font other than the default. But there's another option available to us, and that's to use Inkscape and create an SVG of the font that we're interested in, and then to convert that into a mesh just like we did with the badge. When you're in Inkscape, grab the text tool and take a look at your collection of system fonts. Go up to text, click on text and font, and this will show you all the system fonts. Select one that you like, and then write out what you would like on the back of your Sumobot. So here I have the name I'd like to use on the back of my Sumobot. And now we're going to save this as an SVG file. And I'm going to make sure that this is big enough. This looks like it should be big enough. You would just change the font size here. Let's go 35 and apply. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to save that as, I'm going to call this name. Just before we head back to Blender, we have one last thing that we need to do. We need to convert this, the text object that we just created, to a path. Now that we've done that, we can actually see the path name that will show up in Blender later. So now that we've got that converted, we can save that and now import it into Blender. Let's get rid of the name that we created in Blender previously, and let's import the SVG file we just created. So here it is, and you can see the curve for our text that we created, and it needs to be scaled. So let's click on the curve and let's scale it by 1000% in the X and Y. And let's move it out where we can see it. And of course, we need to reset the origin. So we're going to go origin to geometry. And now what we need to do is convert this to a mesh. So we're going to object convert to mesh. So now that we've got this mesh, we can extrude it. But before we do that, let's make sure we don't have any extra vertices. So mesh, clean up, and merge by distance. So we had 1,376 that we just removed from this. That's one of the risks of using font SVG files. So just make sure that you follow that step before you try doing a Boolean operation. All right, so now let's extrude this. We're going to extrude it down. And now it's time to rotate it. Bring that back on screen where you can see it. There we go. And let's rotate this. I'm gonna rotate it around. Oh, gotta select. There we are. All right. So let's rotate it 90 degrees on Z. Which actually wasn't helpful. We'll rotate it 90 degrees on X. Let's see, I think we need to... There we go. It's really hard to see because we used black text, and so when we convert it into a mesh, we still have a black color on it. If we wanted to modify the color here in the viewport, we could change its color like so, and that's just here in the material properties under the viewport display. Let's get this aligned with the back of our Sumobot now. And let's have a look here. Let's bring it in. We'll center it on the back. I think it should be bigger, so I'm going to scale it. That's good enough. Let's center it. Bring it up a little bit. Get it from the side again. We're going to do a Boolean operation, so we don't want it pushed too far into the back of the Sumobot. So that's enough about right there. Click on the Sumobot body, and we're going to now add a Boolean difference modifier. This one's called text2, so we'll look for text2. And let's apply that. Just hide that. And here we have a fancier version of what we had previously. So those are two different ways of adding a name onto the back of your Sumobot, and you now know how to add a badge on the back of your Sumobot. In the next episode, we will go over how to create wheel hubs and add them to our model.